Hey everybody, my name is Yyanthire. So in the last one, really quickly before we go ahead and get off with this blog, I was talking about how the different game modes and then the different difficulties seemed a little bit not too simplistic for my liking. So as you can see here, when you go ahead and press new game, you're greeted with this, and then you go ahead and click one of them, and then you're greeted with all the difficulties. I felt like this would be too not simplistic for new players, but actually after thinking about it for a while, considering the fact that you can change this at any time in-game, excluding of course Grandmaster difficulty, I feel like this is okay. So I'll go ahead and leave this alone and let the player kind of make their decision at the beginning, and then when they get into the game, if they want to change it, they certainly can. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video. So the saving system could really use a rework. As you can see here, the only options you get are new game and continue. This of course means that you only have a single save file to work with. I'd really like to kind of overhaul this and give the player basically as many save files as they can get. Also, equally as importantly, this needs to be synced up with your Steam profile. So right now the game's only available on Steam. All the Steam users have basically their own user ID, and I'd like to basically make it as though if you have a Steam user ID, or if you don't, in case this game goes beyond Steam in the future, we'll go ahead and create a subdirectory for it. So for each of the profiles, essentially, you'll have your own save file. So in case you're logging in and out between Steam accounts, or even not using a Steam account, you'll be able to still use or still play the game. So with that being said, one of the other major factors is the fact that this is not cloud synced in any way. So if you go ahead and play the game on one computer and then switch to another, those aren't shared in any way, which I also think is fairly bad. So multiple save files, syncing them up with your Steam profile, and then of course making sure that it's synced up with the cloud. That's also really important. I'm going to go ahead and start messing around with those, and I think I have a simple idea to kind of get those working. Alright, so now whenever the player presses new game, we go ahead and increment our index. So as you can see here, at base, our user data file is basically just called userdata_0.dat. That stands for the 0th index, so the first playthrough. And as players press new game, we're going to go ahead and increment that index and then do userdata_1.dat_2.dat, and that just accounts for each and every single playthrough. It's pretty simple. You just check for if the file exists. If it does, go ahead and, in my case, rename your file, but in your case you may have to do something a little bit more special. So this one just basically goes ahead and sets it to userdata_1, and then increments this and just keeps checking until we get basically a free index. And of course I'm using an unsigned long, so we never have negative numbers to worry about, and we never have pretty much anything else to worry about, because you can just basically have infinite playthroughs with this. And then we go ahead and just start the game up. And as you can see in the file, I went ahead and tested it, and this is the base file, and of course this is the next file after creating a new game. I just need to go in and quickly assign this logic into the map data saver, and then we'll be pretty much good to go. So I got the save file screen all mocked up. It was pretty simple to do. Go ahead and click on continue, and then of course now we got our multiple playthroughs. So I got just 2 playthroughs in here, but when we go ahead and click on either of them, go ahead and enter them. So playthrough 2 is my RTS one, and then playthrough 1 is my simplistic style one. So we'll go ahead and wait for it to load. And here we are. As you can see, we're in the RTS mode. Go ahead and click on settings, RTS mode. Of course our rate difficulty is also set. So it's all pretty straightforward to do. I figured I might as well talk about the code just a little bit, just to kind of give you some insight. So as you can see here, here's our save files. The 0 is of course playthrough 1, and then the _1 is of course playthrough 2. I updated it in the game to say playthrough 1 and 2. Just for visibility right now. I figured I might as well make possibly some kind of a way to name your save file or anything, but just for testing right now, that's fine. So coming into the code, it's pretty straightforward. So we just go ahead and basically loop through our entire directory. Look exclusively for those user data files. Then for each user data file, we're going to go ahead and grab out its playthrough number. So as you can see, walking through the code, this first part of the code goes ahead and gets us a list of everything at our data path. So our data path is of course this directory right here. So this is going to be universal across all the platforms. Make sure that if you are using any kind of data path, that you're using the application persistent path, which is of course what this is using. And of course this is our file mask, just to make it a little bit easier. Our user file name base is just user data, and then added the wildcard character just to get everything. So what that's going to do is just get us a list of these two files right here. And then with those two files, we're going to go ahead and get the file name without the extension. This is pretty important because it's going to give you the full path leading up to this. And of course the file name, we don't care at all about that. We just care about this 0 and 1. So when I go ahead and do the get file name without extension, it'll just give me userdata underscore 0 and userdata underscore 1 and kick off that .dat as well. Then just to double check, just make sure it's a user data file. Coming down into here, of course I got a little bit of code I can just remove, but I might as well show off both instances. So as you can see here, we just grab the base file name. So this is that same user data. I added the underscore on there because we want to get rid of that too. And then I go ahead and do a remove based on the index of this base file. So it's going to start at the index being user data underscore. That index, of course, is right here at 0, and it's going to go for the length of that. So in this case, it's going to go straight up to this little 1, this little 0, and lop that all off under the remove, and then give us that. Then, of course, if we needed to get rid of the this part up here got rid of the extension for us, but if we did need to get rid of the extension, we could just grab out the extension itself, .dat, and then do the exact same thing, go up to that .dat in the file name, this index right here, and delete off the rest of it. So that's pretty simple. Now that we have a number right here, we can go ahead and parse it out. I want to parse it out as a ulong because that's basically what I'm using across the rest of the program. It's best to use the exact same data type, so in this case, unsigned long. So we go ahead and parse it out, and we get our number, and then from there, we're going to go ahead and create the little continue button. So when the user goes ahead and gets in there, they have a separate little button for each one, and of course fill out all of our data, grab our index, etc., and make sure that those are all tied in together. So taking a look at everything here, there's a couple things that I of course need to figure out and sort of mock up. So the name of the playthrough, I feel like giving them a unique name would be pretty good for the player, just to kind of say, oh hey, this is playthrough, you know, whatever name I want to put here, and then this is another playthrough, etc., instead of just having these generic names. Just to give the player a little bit more understanding. And of course, it would be kind of interesting to go ahead and grab out some important data like playtime, how many times you've been defeated, how many of your units have died, etc. Just like little statistics, just to kind of give you a little more insight. And of course, hook up this little delete button. I haven't hooked that up yet, so anytime I click it, it doesn't actually delete the index. There's a couple extra cleanup things I need to do, and the big one is, of course, linking this so that all of your Steam profiles are linked through a subdirectory. So if you switch Steam accounts, for example, you'll be able to get those unique playthroughs, and rather than have them all jumbled together, which would just kind of like, that just sounds like it'll end pretty poorly. If you go ahead and just switch Steam users, for example, and launch the game, basically what's going to happen is you're going to overwrite save files potentially through the cloud, which will be pretty silly. Of course, I need to get to the cloud, but it'll come a little bit later. Well, it wouldn't be one of my videos without getting totally distracted on something else. I started to mess around with some movement issues, so I was noticing the movement's totally fine, but when you kind of get around corners and stuff, you can kind of get locked in. So as you saw right there, the character, I added some additional code in here just to kind of try to unlock the character. Normally they get stuck about like right there on that stump, but did some adjustments to the code and adjustments to the pathfinding algorithm, and it seems to kind of work now. It works a little bit better. It's still not totally perfect, especially if you go for like very long distance paths, but for the most part I think this should be fine. Better than what it was. Units would kind of get stuck on stuff randomly and just kind of get a little annoying. But let's go back to the normal saving stuff. So the deletion stuff's now in. It was pretty simple. So whenever you go ahead and click the little X button, as you can see when you hover over it, get a little highlight, and when you click it, it pops up with another one. It says, do you really want to delete it? And if you go ahead and click it again, and it's gone. And of course, let me try and come back. There's nothing there. So the save file is totally gone. If I actually check the folder itself, completely gone. So very simple. Just grabs the directory files and just deletes them. So that should be pretty straightforward. So I greatly overhauled the continue screen, as you can see here. We have all of our standard stuff. However, now as you can see, we have the playthrough index. This is just kind of important, more for like debugging instances. So we have the index in the physical save files. So if you were to ever possibly go into here, you can see, oh, user data 0 corresponds to 1. And of course we have the name of the map that the player is currently in. As you can see, both of them are just Grove of Barren. That's just the first map, but in the future there's going to be more official maps, so stay tuned for that. And of course have the playtime variable from here, and then the gameplay scheme, the difficulty, and then I'm going to have a bunch of extra variables here, so like number of defeats, number of times a player unit has died, number of enemies killed, mini-bosses, etc. As you can see on my second one over here, still on the same map, but the playtime's a little bit longer, and we're in RTS mode and we're on the hard difficulty. So just some quick things to give the player. I decided to go away from the naming of the playthrough. I didn't feel like it kind of incorporated it in any way, because it's not like you're like naming your character in other types of games. This is just kind of like, you can almost like think of it like, I could think of it like naming like your army or something like that, but no, I'll just stick it to the name of the map that the player is currently in. I think that kind of fits a little bit better, because you're really just looking at these to see which one I'm currently playing, so you can just get back to it quickly. There's a small bug I need to fix with this. I had an instance where this second one didn't load, which is fairly interesting, so I'll have to play around with that some more and see what could have been going on there. But for the most part, I think this is a pretty good setup. There's tons of information down here at the bottom. I kind of don't really like it, but I think it's descriptive enough to make it interesting to look at, so we'll just leave it alone. So I figured I should talk about this just because it came across when I was working on this, and it was involving a bug, in which case I had some instances where one of my queues wasn't completely filled up all the time reliably, and it was really weird. It was just like sometimes random ones would just be completely nulled out. I found out that it's because I'm not using a thread safe mechanism. So I was originally just using this normal queue, and of course I'm going to go and enqueue my data. As you can see, it's being done on another thread, which of course is really bad, because when I go and try and dequeue it, it might not necessarily be updated on the thread level, so it might be basically just out of sync, essentially. So what C# does for you is creates this concurrent queue to instead switch over to. So just a little, almost like a PSA in a sense, to kind of get you aware, just in case you are running into instances where you are using threading. Just make sure you're using these thread safe data types. Otherwise, just use the normal data types. Alright, and that'll be it for this one. In the next one, I'd hope to actually start doing some more gameplay adjustments, and then of course I'd like to do some more storyline stuff and get back to the main task at hand with regards to releasing the next version update. Alright, you guys take care.